Welcome back to another Purpose Serve podcast episode. I'm your host, Daryl Wingfield. I'm glad to be back with you guys. It feel like it's been a little minute. Shout out to all the new listeners that's out there. I noticed that we have a couple of new people from different countries, such as I see that we got some people that's listening and watching this from Germany. Shout out to y'all. And also to shout out to everybody that's just listening and being in tune in general. Now, I want to talk to you guys recently about what's been going on. Now, I always say that I try to connect the previous podcast to the ones that's currently now. And we're going to go all the way back real quick. Back when I believe I had Cassandra on the podcast. We I ended up wanting to go to an art show due to the fact that a couple of my friends do art, and I wanted to introduce them to that atmosphere. And I asked her about it, and she told me about this thing called Pancakes and Booze that was going on in DC. So we decided that we was going to take a road trip down there. It was mad dope. Went down there, and the vibe was pretty awesome, man. I suggest if you guys never heard of Pancakes and Booze and you're interested in art, go check it out. I know that they do a lot of their events all across the country. Like I know is one coming up in New York, October 12th, I believe. But yeah, it's dope, man. They give you free pancakes and there's booze. And but once we got out there, we got to the event and everything. Um, it was pretty dope. It caught me off guard, man. I'm not even gonna lie. So when we first walk in there, there's like people pretty much got their displays of art at I can't necessarily call it a stand, but you can see a lot of their portraits, their prints, um, so many different things like them selling their stickers. I got to see so many different art styles, but there was something profound and incredible that I like learned there, through watching other people and listening to a lot of their stories on how they came about making art that they did. And a lot of it I noticed was driven through strong emotions, you know what I mean? And not necessarily good emotions that what people would typically look at it as good emotions. And a lot of it, they took a lot of pain that they went through in their own personal lives and things that was kind of hard to deal with. And that's how a lot of them introduced themselves into art. And a lot of them also was saying that they were self-taught. And to me, it was crazy to look at some of these people, like the different arts that they created, from abstract uh, to you seeing portraits of people. So many wide ranges, man. I wish I was more familiar with art terminology, but I'm not. But you necessarily don't need to be in tune into the art world to look at something and feel inspired and have it invoke a feeling within you with which you resonate with the art. And the more I kept listening to these people tell their backstory on why they create the art that they do and some of the stories behind their work, it just made me realize that we all go through life and we look at it in our lens through our experience and what we've been through. It's all different, but they found a way to channel that into something because it seemed like for the most part across the board, it felt like that they had to. They needed to do something. And another thing that I also realized from this art show was that a lot of them they wasn't they necessarily wasn't getting the gratification that they wanted from what they were doing. And I can imagine that feeling gotta like suck real bad. You feel me? To put something, your heart and soul into something, and then somebody don't look at it the same way as you, or don't, feel the same way as you, and they probably won't care all that much. But the cool thing is that through them being persistent through what they was doing, they found a space where people do accept like their artwork, and they go out seeking it and looking for it. It was so many people that was going there. For example, the dude D, that he was making prints and portraits of like icons such as like Kobe, Nipsey Hussle, and all of that. And he was saying that how one person came in that night for the art show wearing one of the hoodies that he made, and we was talking about that, and he was saying like how much that meant to him that this person like did that and went out their way to show support, not only with buying a hoodie, but even pulling up to where he was at to show even that much more support and to meet the man behind the work. And to me, that's a dope environment to be in. And I realized that even if you don't necessarily is given a meaningful work to do, you could definitely create it if it ain't those resources, like, I guess, that's pushing you towards it. You know what I mean? Sometimes you do have to push, and a lot of those people did push to get to where they are, and I commend them for that because it's not an easy thing, and it's not. This life is not an easy thing. The one thing that I try not to preach on here, you know, I do be having my preacher vibes OD on here, but people necessarily shouldn't go for, trying to be happy, trying to live a happy life. That's like mad unrealistic due to the fact that a lot of things is, outside of our control that comes with life. You know what I mean? Like, such as something as basic as death. Nobody wants death to happen to them, and there's not a lot of people that I could think of that'd be happy in regards to, death or somebody close to them dying, and something like that. That's extremely extreme, but that's what come with it. You know what I mean? And that's why, for me, I preach. People searching for things to live a meaningful life and have meaningful work to balance yourself through all of that. You know what I mean? Through the roller coaster ride. But back to pancakes and booze. I ran into a couple of artists there, but one in particular, she had a line drawn, and it was two people pretty much facing each other with no eyes, and like their heads is like, it's like clouded lines. It's like real, like abstract lines. Like I said, I can't tell you the exact terminology for what the style was, but I instantly knew, I caught a vibe from it once I got it, and I just was asking her specific questions about the artwork. And one of the profound things that she said to me is how, the reason why they didn't have eyes in the picture of the people looking at each other, is that she said, you can have a conversation and somebody's head is somewhere else while you're talking to them, and vice versa. The other person is doing the same thing. Their head is somewhere else. They're in the cloud somewhere. So I was just like, wow, like that's kind of it was an extremely simple art. I wouldn't necessarily say it was easy to do, but it was a simple concept with a very, very deep meaning. And actually, this correlates to the very next podcast that I'm going to be dropping tomorrow. Actually, I'm gonna drop this tonight, but I'm dropping that podcast with her tomorrow. I got her to come on the podcast and pretty much talk about how she came about doing the artwork that she do, and also some of the struggles that come with being an artist. And typically the same questions that I ask anybody that be on the podcast is like, how do they maintain the struggle of always being inspired to do what they do? Because that's definitely, I would want to say, the trickiest thing. You know, once you tap into whatever it is that you're tapped into and whatever it is that you're doing, the hardest thing is maintaining that inspiration. I remember Michael Jordan saying that, I think this is on the last leg of the three peats, what a second three-peat, and he was just saying that it don't get easier the more he kept winning the championship. In fact, it gets more difficult because you got to find new motivations. It's just not the same as, when you win your first championship. You want that feeling because you never had it before, but maintaining that and always staying on top of that and finding new ways to stay on top of that motivation and inspiration to keep doing what you're doing. He said that's the tricky part. And for me, before you even get to buckling down on whatever it is that you're doing, or meaningful work that you're trying to create for yourself, it's I like the process in retrospect of the trying to find whatever it is that's your niche, or that you want to do. That's very, very important. I'm learning a lot about the hero's journey. This is something that I've been looking at like crazy as of late. It kind of got my mind wrapped up. You know what I mean? And this is something that I briefly talk about on a podcast here and there sometimes. And somebody that I bring up all the time. The late great Joseph Campbell and his construct of the hero's journey. You know, and sometimes we accept the routine that we naturally grown accustomed to. The same job, same places, same faces, same settings all the time. You know what I mean? After a while, we don't like it and we want something different, but going towards that different thing, that's just not it, because the uncertainty that comes with it, you know. And even to put it in a hypothetical context, if you was offered, I don't know, to go to Australia for like, if you've never been to Australia for like a couple of weeks, you don't know what's out there. Somebody just offered it to you, and you're deciding that, you know what, I do really want to do this, but I don't want to leave my job. I don't want to leave my friends and everything, even though it's something that you've been craving for a long time. And it's just like, yeah, I'm about to see a different place, but what's the point? You know what I mean? What's the point of going there and all of that? You know what I mean? But through going there, you know what I mean, you discover a whole bunch of, like, about yourself. And all the time I talk about like things that scare you. Um, so many things, man. It's so many different things. Like, and that's the hero's journey can be applied to God honest truth anything. If you follow like stories like something as basic as the Star Wars or Harry Potter, that's like, you following the hero's journey. Like, for example, with Harry Potter, you following Harry Potter's hero's journey. And the part that where most people get stuck at is right before he goes to Hogwarts. You know what I mean? That's like the toughest part for anybody. Anybody would love to do what Harry Potter did. You know what I mean? It'd be awesome. Because, like, you know what I mean? You see the whole journey for what it is. Like, that's adventurous and that's fun. But to ground it back in reality, we all have these callings all the time. You know what I mean? And a lot of times we refuse to not take them. And even from a personal aspect for me, which is something that I bring up all the time, was when I left for Spain. that was me going and towards that. You know what I mean? And not sure what's to come out of that. And I remember um, a couple months beforehand, right before I left, it felt so good, like knowing that I was about to leave. And as the time got closer and closer and closer, that feeling started to switch to being excited to like being nervous. And like I said, the closer it got, the more I started feeling extremely nervous about the decision I was making. You know what I mean? Because it was real, and it wasn't. I wasn't going there with nobody. I didn't have no help. You know what I mean? And even during the process, it still was difficult. But crossing over to do that was, I would want to say, the most pivotal thing that probably happened to me for me to even get to this point, because the process through and through has not been, I wouldn't necessarily say it's fun, because it's not. If you guys have been tuned in to this podcast at this point, you know, 30 plus episodes in, this is living life to the best of your potential is not, it's not easy, it's not glorified, and people ultimately don't want it. And the reason why they don't want it, because it turns into a unselfish act pretty quickly, and most people do things for themselves, like seriously just looking out for themselves. And I told you guys at one point I was like that, and it was hard to be selfless in the midst of that. And crazy thing enough, from looking at this whole hero's journey, I see that there's a pattern. And the pattern is in polarities. And what I mean by that is in opposites. And typically, when you get shown what you actually have to do in regards to something that's bigger than yourself, it should be scary. It should scare the shit out you. If it don't, then it's not big enough, to be quite honest, because that means that you have to stretch the bounds of what you currently know now. And for you guys to really understand that, it's going to go past reading books. You know what I mean? It's going to go past trying to go to seminars. It's going to really take you taking that leap and taking that self initiative to go figure out whatever it is that that higher calling it is. You know what I mean? And for me, the reason why, like, I started Purpose Serve, one of the many reasons is to show people, and this is a repetitive message on here all the time, that we all are more capable of what we think, and we have to push the bounds of what we know. And certain times, not even certain times, I'll say all the time, learning is a very uncomfortable process. You know what I mean? And it definitely could get frustrating. And then some of the things that I even talk about on this journey is the frustration part. It comes with it. And that's why I think that you guys shouldn't be, chasing happiness. You know what I mean? Because it's a fleeting feeling. It comes and go, just like sadness, just like being angry and all of that. But like I said, it's all about whatever that bigger picture is. And another thing is, I always say, don't take this life too serious. Find whatever it is that you like, you want to create, and that really resonates with you, and try to convert it to yourself in a way where you can convert it to others through, life being better, like, around you. The hero's journey ultimately ends with what they typically call the elixir. You know what I mean? That's the whole entire point of taking the hero's journey, is you go out and you leave the place of comfort that you always knew, and go towards something that scares you, but at the same time is showing you whatever truth you supposed to you supposed to know. And this is perfect that I'm actually doing this because I can actually keep using, movie references. But like a movie like The Matrix, you know what I mean? That's like perfect for like the hero's journey. You know, you got Mr. Anderson working a computer job. Don't like it, hate it. Just think that there's something bigger out there, but just don't know what it is until Morpheus introduces him to it. You know what I mean? And he didn't accept it at first. You know what I mean? And he didn't see himself, as that guy. He really didn't see himself as that guy, and it took him a while to see himself as that guy. But as time went on, he started developing the tools and everything that he needed in order to be that guy. And that's a transformation process. And through that transformation process, there's a lot of things that, that goes right. And there's a lot of things that goes wrong, you know. And the things that's going wrong typically are showing you where you can grow at. And people oftentimes could take that as a negative thing. And I even fall victim to that sometimes too. But nowadays, I try to interpret that in such a way that I can convert whatever it is that, that shortcoming or whatever that failure, and always look at it as what's to learn. And just like I said not too long ago, when you put yourself in that process, man, I really do believe that learning equals growing. I wish that I I paid attention in freaking high school and college. I find myself doing things now that I should have been doing while I was in school. You know what I mean? I've been finding myself reading research articles. You know what I mean? I always been reading books. That's like nothing new. I've been reading books since I was uh, like in the second grade, first grade. Like casually just reading books like on my own time, man. For a kid to be doing that, you know what I mean? I was kind of enigma. I would be reading books, I'm thinking like in the first grade, I was like on the fifth grade reading level, but still would be acting out in class. You know what I mean? So it was like kind of weird. I always been it was easy for me to get engulfed in a different world through reading books, and that's why I liked reading so much, because I can put myself in whatever world that this author uh, created. I could submerge myself into it, and now it seemed like that kind of that kind of grew into something else, because now I can find myself doing that uh, at this point towards anything that somebody is creating. I like at this point understanding why things work the way they work, and what is the purpose of this thing. That's typically how my mind has been functioning lately. And just like I said, I noticed that there's a lot of polarities and opposites when you ask questions like that, you know. And questions typically come from there's a problem, and answers come from like solutions. And the concepts that I do talk about on this podcast all the time boils down to things like that. And you need to start reverting those questions, like, to yourself, in order to gain progress and not feel as though that this is a meaningless life, which is a way you can view life, to be quite honest. And people do. You can look at this life at many angles and sides and not be wrong about, your viewpoint. And that's why I say all the time that that's how strong that our minds actually are. It's just that it creates this world that we're living in, and the vibe and the meanings that we take from it and perceive with our senses and our cognition. And a lot of these things as well, I came to understand through self-discovery and me figuring this stuff out accidentally in the beginning as I went along, and now it's been more purposeful and intentful. But yet again, I would have never guessed that it would have led me down here. And this is the message that I'm trying to get out to God honest truth as many people as possible. And I would 100% need y'all help in that regard. So by downloading the podcast, by sharing this, even having conversations with other people pertaining this podcast, and it goes a long way, you know. And you'll be surprised of what people think in regards to this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, asking people and having conversations, do you believe that it's possible that anybody can live a meaningful life the way that they want to or choose to? Some people going to say no, and some people are going to say yeah, due to circumstances and, your environment and all of that. But I believe that if you constantly push the boundaries of what you know and some of the things that you use and how you go about using some of the things that you use, it could change a lot, on how you view everything that's going on. And through me looking at different people and even having some of the people that's on this podcast, it also gives me a different lens on how to operate my creativity. And a lot of answers are universal to some of the troubles that we have. And the one thing that I was asking to almost every artist at Pancakes and Booze is, do you believe that everybody's an artist? And I believe I ended that with a Cassandra podcast as well. She said yeah, and all across the board they all say yeah too, because art doesn't restrict you to a certain style, a certain format. You take whatever creativity that you're feeling and the feelings that you have and try to portray it on this canvas. You know what I mean? That gives you your dimensions and your limitations, but at the same time, it allows you to create a world. And people that are really, really, really good at that, they can get you and pull you in and submerge you into the world that they created. And not only is this within art, there's so many different styles of art. That's the same thing with music. Hearing a song and it evokes a certain feeling in you or take you back to a place where it's just like, in your childhood or a relationship, a breakup, or any of that. Music invokes that, but that started from somebody's creativity and them laying out something for your ears to feel something. That's the same thing with movies. It's everywhere, and that's why I'm saying that, these forms of creativity is right in front of you. You just have to know how to look at it, but knowing how to look at it totally depends on how comfortable you are with yourself and how well you know yourself. And if you don't know that, that's what you should be figuring out first before you try to figure out, what type of meaningful life you're trying to live, or what kind of meaningful life that you, what kind of meaningful work that you're trying to do. I do apologize about that. Those two things are important, but understanding who you are in retrospect to that is essential before you even get to that. You need to know where you are and who you are, compared to the bigger picture and the grand scheme of things. I honestly, this is going to be a short podcast today too. I just wanted to get a couple of things off my chest before tomorrow's podcast upload. But to everybody that's been tuning in, especially since the beginning, I really, really, really genuinely appreciate it. And thank you for being a part of this. I want to give also, this is a late shout out, but shout out to Joanna. She always shows love to the podcast. And for her, for a sociology class, she has to do like a mini podcast. So I'm wishing you mad support on that. And I know that's going to be a killer podcast And also, yet again, like I said to the at the beginning of the podcast, to all the new listeners and all the people that's viewing this for the first time, yet again, thank you. Yet again, I appreciate this, and it's never too late. That's for one. For two, it's always opportunities out there, and if your environment ain't really supportive of that, you need to find out where it's supportive at, first and foremost, for whatever. I can't freaking talk. It's kind of late. But this should be that place if you don't know where to start, I want this to be that place because and all in all you do need support. And when I first started out doing all the stuff that I'm doing, from basketball to starting this brand and to starting this podcast, um the support wasn't really there like that, you know what I mean? And as time went on, the support started picking up more and more and more and more. um but all in all, it taught me so many valuable lessons, which, for example, a lot of things that I learned from basketball, it carried over to what I'm doing now. And it just, as I keep going, it seemed like it's just keep evolving and the picture keep developing more clear, but also the picture just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And you guys all are capable of that. And there's not really a safe place for that, and it's not really a safe place for the ideas and the dreams and the aspirations that you have, because majority of people are dream killers. But if you're strong enough, you know what I mean, you can switch their vibe from being dream killers and then turn them into dreamers. And that's the mission that I'm on. It's always going to be an uphill battle, but I'm suited for it. And I believe y'all are too. If y'all are tuned into the same frequency right now, you're hearing this for a reason, and you're watching this for a reason at this exact moment. And serve your purpose. I love y'all. Thank you for the support yet again. And I'm out. Deuces.